Currently, there is a divide between those who favor cyber schools and those who think that certain restrictions need to be placed on them. Many school districts in Pennsylvania are looking to the State General Assembly to pass legislation that would shift the burden of cyber school tuition from the student's home school district to the State Department of Education. The districts argue that the tuitions they are required to pay under current state law far exceed the actual cost of a cyber school education. And these payments are increasing every year as more and more students choose cyber schools. One superintendent, David Price of the East Lycoming School District, feels that cyber schools create a disservice to students in Pennsylvania. His school district paid approximately $180,000 for 23 students who enrolled in cyber schools. According to Price, this cost wiped out the district's increase in state funding for the current school year. Unlike traditional school districts, cyber schools are permitted to accumulate surpluses with no cap. Currently, 5 of Pennsylvania's 12 cyber schools reported fund balances of over 30% for the 2005-2006 school year, according to legislative testimony before the House Education Committee. Districts also argue that cyber schools do not have the same accountability, checks, and balances as does homeschooling, the other non-traditional educational option. For instance, there are no comparable requirements to keep attendance logs or other records of study that exempt a homeschool student from the traditional school attendance. Critics of the cyber school system hope to have House Bill 446 approved by the General Assembly. This proposed legislation would transfer funding of cyber schools from school districts to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. It would also place restrictions on cyber school tuition related to student enrollment, and it would subject cyber schools to all current school district budgeting requirements, including placing caps on fund balances. Many people say cyber schools are draining resources from school districts, yet according to the Commonwealth Foundation, cyber school costs are less than 1/2 of 1% of the $22 billion spent on public schools in the 2005-2006 school year. And they say by educating students with fewer education tax dollars, cyber schools are saving, not costing taxpayers millions of dollars. Currently, cyber schools come under the state's 1997 charter school law that requires districts to pay tuition for each of its enrolled students. The tuition is equal to the district's per pupil cost minus a prorated share for programs that cyber schools do not provide. Oftentimes, tuition costs greatly exceed the amount of state subsidy a district would receive for the cyber school student, since state subsidies generally are much lower than actual per pupil costs. House Bill 446 calls for the state education department to pay for cyber schools, but would limit the amount of tuition the schools can collect to a range of $3,000 to $5,000 per pupil, depending on a school's enrollment. Cyber school administrators argue that House Bill 446's formula for tuition would put them out of business. They say the notion that cyber schools cost much less than traditional schools is wrong because their technology expenses are quite significant. Their costs include supplying each student with a computer and an internet connection, using an online curriculum, and equipment maintenance. Some say that's nearly the cost of maintaining a building. Another concern many school district officials have is that many cyber school students are former homeschool students for which the district received no current state reimbursement. Many superintendents say their cyber school tuition costs come as a shock because they often do not know how many students will enroll in cyber schools until the start of the school year after the district's annual budget is approved. Also, cyber school critics maintain that current tuition funding formula allows cyber schools to accumulate large surpluses because the funds they receive are not related to the actual cost of providing the education. The cost is much lower than traditional schools because cyber schools do not pay for things like maintenance or utilities. House Bill 446 was approved by the House Education Committee in December of 2007. It is currently being held up in the Appropriations Committee, and many feel the bill will not make it to the House floor. Approved or not approved, House Bill 446 illustrates the divide between those who favor cyber schools and their critics.